Everyone laughed at her, until the richest man in the room called her his wife. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to our main character. Charlotte Williams, a young woman with little to her name, had never felt like she belonged. She had always been the quiet one, the one left in the shadows at social events. Tonight was no different. She found herself in the corner of a lavish ballroom, the glittering lights dancing off expensive jewelry and the hushed laughter of the city's elite filling the air. But Charlotte wasn't part of that world. She was just a simple girl from a small town, here only because of a friend who had insisted she come along. The whispers started almost immediately. Who is she? Why is she here? The words were soft but cutting, and she could feel the weight of their judgment in every glance. She tried to ignore them, focusing instead on the glass of champagne in her hand. But it didn't help. The longer she stood there, the more out of place she felt. She wasn't rich. She wasn't glamorous. She wasn't what they expected at a party like this. She was just Charlotte, awkward and unsure of how to fit in. A group of well-dressed women passed by, their laughter ringing in her ears. One of them caught her eye and smiled, but the smile was a little too wide, a little too forced. "Nice dress," she said, the words dripping with insincerity before she turned away, the rest of the group following suit. Charlotte's face flushed with embarrassment, but she didn't let it show. She lifted her chin slightly, took a deep breath, and tried to look more confident than she felt. That's when he entered. Maxwell Hayes, the richest man in the room. Tall, with a commanding presence that seemed to demand attention without even trying. His tailored suit fit him perfectly, his dark hair neatly combed, and his expression a mixture of seriousness and calm. People immediately stepped aside for him, almost like the room instinctively knew to give him space. Charlotte wasn't immune to his presence. She watched him as he moved through the crowd, his gaze scanning the room with precision, but not looking anyone in the eye for too long. He was a man used to being in control. But then, something unexpected happened. Max walked toward her. For a moment, Charlotte wondered if he was walking past her, but no, he stopped right in front of her. He didn't look down on her the way the others had. Instead, he offered a slight, almost imperceptible smile. "Hello," he said, his voice low and smooth, yet with a touch of curiosity. Charlotte blinked, unsure of what to say. She wasn't used to being noticed by someone like him, let alone spoken to. "Hi," she managed to reply, her voice betraying a nervousness she couldn't hide. There was a brief silence before Max spoke again, his gaze fixed on her with a calm intensity. "I don't think we've met before. I'm Maxwell Hayes." Charlotte blinked again, stunned by the recognition of his name. Of course, she knew who he was. He was a billionaire, the kind of man who belonged to a different world altogether. "Charlotte," she said, finally finding her voice. "Charlotte Williams." There was a pause as he took a moment to study her, his gaze never leaving her face. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Charlotte," he said with a slight nod. For a moment, the crowd seemed to disappear. The voices faded into the background as the two of them stood in an odd, unspoken silence. Charlotte couldn't explain why, but in that moment, she didn't feel like just the outsider anymore. Something in the way Max looked at her made her feel seen for the first time in a long while. Charlotte stood there, her heart pounding in her chest as Max Hayes, the richest man in the room, continued to gaze at her. There was something in his eyes, something she couldn't quite place, but it made her feel like she was standing under a spotlight, the entire room fading away. She took a step back, instinctively feeling out of place, but Max didn't move. Instead, he simply raised an eyebrow, his expression still calm, but now tinged with curiosity. "You look like you're about to disappear into the wall, Charlotte," he said, his voice light, but with a touch of humor. "Are you always this shy?" She blinked, a little surprised by his bluntness, but also strangely relieved. His words weren't condescending, they were just honest. I guess I'm not used to all this," she said, her voice a little quieter than she wanted. She gestured vaguely at the glittering crowd, the expensive gowns, the crystal chandeliers that sparkled above them. "I'm not really from this world." Max's gaze softened for a moment, and then he nodded slowly. I can tell, he said, his voice carrying a warmth she hadn't expected. But that's not a bad thing. Not everyone here is worth your time anyway. Charlotte blinked, processing his words. What do you mean? She asked, unable to hide her curiosity. Look around, he said, gesturing toward the crowd of people mingling, laughing, and clinking glasses. Most of them are here because of their status, their wealth. They care more about appearances than anything else. It's all a show. Charlotte's brow furrowed as she listened, trying to make sense of what he was saying. Max took a step closer, his presence calming, yet powerful. You don't need to fit in with them, Charlotte. You're better than that. She swallowed, trying to keep her composure. Was this real? She had never been treated like this before, especially not by someone like Max Hayes. He was the kind of person people fawned over, not someone who would waste time talking to someone like her. Yet, here he was, standing before her, talking to her like she mattered. It felt surreal. You don't know anything about me, she said softly, unsure why she felt the need to say it. Max didn't flinch, though. I know enough, he replied simply. I know that you're not one of those people who hides behind their money or their title. You're real. Charlotte felt a pang in her chest at his words. No one had ever said something like that to her. In a world where people judged others based on their bank accounts or what they wore, it was hard to believe that someone like Max could see through all of that. Thanks, she said quietly, unsure of what else to say. There was an awkward pause between them, and for a moment, Charlotte thought maybe this was it, that Max would just move on, leaving her standing there, just like everyone else had. But instead, Max looked down at her, his expression changing to something softer, more genuine. I'm not going to let you stand here alone, he said with a quiet smile. Come on. Let me introduce you to a few people. He didn't wait for her to respond, taking her arm gently and leading her through the crowd. Charlotte couldn't help but feel a sense of disbelief. She had come to the party as an outsider, unsure of her place. But now, walking beside Max, it felt as if she were part of something much bigger, something that made her heart beat a little faster with anticipation. As they made their way through the crowd, Charlotte noticed the way people looked at them. Some were curious, others were jealous, but none of them seemed to dare approach Max. It was clear that he commanded respect, and for reasons she couldn't yet understand, he was giving her that same respect. When they reached a small group of people, Max introduced her casually, but with a confidence that made her stand a little taller. Everyone, this is Charlotte, he said, his voice carrying just the right amount of authority. Charlotte, these are some of my colleagues. The group greeted her politely, but Charlotte could tell they were all curious about her, probably wondering why Max was paying her so much attention. It was the first time in a long while that Charlotte didn't feel like an outsider, and as the evening wore on, she found herself slowly opening up. Max was still by her side, making sure she was included in conversations, never leaving her to fend for herself. He was unlike anyone she had ever met, and as the night went on, Charlotte couldn't help but feel a sense of connection growing between them. She had always been the quiet girl, the one who faded into the background, but with Max, she felt like maybe, just maybe, she could be more. Maybe she could belong, not because of who she was with, but because of who she was becoming. As the evening came to a close, Max walked her to the door, his hand resting gently on her arm. I hope you had a good time tonight, Charlotte, he said, his voice warm. I'll see you again soon. Charlotte nodded, her heart racing as she tried to find the words to thank him. She started, but Max cut her off with a smile. No need for thanks. Just keep being yourself. And with that, he turned and disappeared into the night, leaving Charlotte standing there, staring after him. She wasn't sure what had just happened, but one thing was certain, her world had just changed. And it had all started with one man who had seen something in her that no one else had. Max's words lingered in Charlotte's mind as she walked home that evening. Just keep being yourself. It was all so simple, yet it felt so monumental. No one had ever told her that before. No one had ever made her feel like she was enough just the way she was. She had spent her entire life trying to fit into molds that never quite felt right. But tonight, for the first time, she felt seen. The moon hung high above, casting a soft glow over the city streets. Charlotte's footsteps echoed as she walked, but her heart felt lighter than it had in years. She didn't know exactly what had changed, but she knew she wasn't the same person who had walked into that ballroom just hours ago. The next few days passed in a blur of excitement, and uncertainty. Max's words kept echoing in her mind, and she couldn't help but replay their conversations over and over again. She found herself wondering what it would be like to be around him more, to understand what exactly it was that made him different from everyone else. Was it just his wealth? Or was it something deeper? The answer came sooner than she expected. Max called her a few days later, inviting her to dinner. It was casual, but Charlotte couldn't shake the feeling that this was something more. As the day approached, she found herself getting nervous. She had never been on a dinner date with someone like Max before. She had always been the type to avoid the spotlight, to keep to herself. But this felt different. This was a chance for her to step out of her shell, to see what could happen if she just let go of her fears. On the night of their dinner, Charlotte stood in front of the mirror, adjusting her dress for the 5th time. It wasn't anything extravagant, just a simple black dress, but it made her feel like she belonged somewhere. As she applied a final coat of lip gloss, she took a deep breath and stepped out of her apartment. Max was already waiting for her when she arrived at the restaurant, looking as handsome as ever in a sharp suit. There was an air of confidence about him that made her feel both nervous and at ease all at once. He smiled when he saw her, his eyes lighting up. "You look stunning, Charlotte," he said, his voice warm. Charlotte couldn't help but blush. "Thank you. You look great too." Max offered her his arm, and they walked into the restaurant together. The evening was relaxed, filled with light conversation and laughter. Max made her feel at ease, asking her questions about her life, her dreams, and even her childhood. Charlotte found herself opening up in a way she never had before. She talked about the small town she grew up in, the struggles she faced in finding her place in the world, and her dreams of someday doing something bigger, something that made a difference. Max listened intently, his gaze never leaving hers. There was something about him that made her feel like she was the only person in the room. And as the night went on, Charlotte began to realize that she was enjoying herself. For once, she wasn't just the girl standing on the sidelines. She wasn't just an outsider. With Max, she was someone worth knowing. As dessert arrived, Max looked at her with a thoughtful expression. "You know," he said, his tone serious but still warm, "I think you're going to do something amazing with your life, Charlotte." She was taken aback. "You really think so?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know so," he replied. "You have more potential than you realize. You just need to believe in yourself." Charlotte felt a lump form in her throat. No one had ever said that to her before. No one had ever believed in her the way Max did. She couldn't help but feel a surge of emotion, a mix of gratitude and something else, something she couldn't quite name. The night ended all too soon, but as they stood outside the restaurant, Max turned to her with a smile. "I had a great time tonight, Charlotte. I hope we can do this again soon." Charlotte nodded, her heart racing in her chest. "I'd like that." As she walked home that night, the city lights sparkling around her, she couldn't help but feel a sense of hope she hadn't felt in years. She wasn't sure where this was all going, but for the first time, she felt like the possibilities were endless. Maybe, just maybe, this was the start of something new, something beautiful. And it all began with a man who had seen her for who she truly was. The days that followed Charlotte's dinner with Max felt surreal. She had always been the kind of person who kept to herself, blending into the background. But ever since that night, something had shifted. Max had opened her eyes to a world she never thought she'd belong to, and now she couldn't stop thinking about him. It wasn't just his wealth or his power that fascinated her. It was his kindness, his ability to make her feel seen when no one else had. As the week passed, Max continued to reach out to her, inviting her to events, introducing her to new people, and most importantly, making her feel like she was part of something important. He never treated her like an outsider. Every time they spent time together, Charlotte felt more at ease in her own skin. She had never been someone who was comfortable in high society settings, but with Max, it was different. He made everything feel normal, like it was just the two of them, even when they were surrounded by people who seemed to have everything: money, status, fame. They were at a gala one evening when Charlotte felt a sudden wave of self-doubt. Surrounded by elegantly dressed people, she felt her insecurities bubbling up. She was aware of the whispers and the curious stares. People were starting to notice her, and with that attention came a sense of pressure she hadn't anticipated. As Max introduced her to more people, she could feel herself shrinking back, unsure of how to respond to their probing questions. But then Max turned to her, sensing her discomfort. He placed a hand on her shoulder, his touch gentle but firm, grounding her. "You're fine, Charlotte," he said softly. "Just breathe. You don't need to prove anything to anyone. Just be yourself." His words were like a lifeline, and Charlotte took a deep breath, pushing aside the doubts that were clouding her mind. She realized in that moment that Max wasn't just helping her navigate this world of wealth and status. He was helping her become the person she had always wanted to be. He was showing her that she didn't need to change to fit in. She already belonged. As the night went on, Charlotte found herself more confident, engaging in conversations and even laughing with the other guests. Max was always by her side, but it was clear he wasn't hovering. He trusted her to handle herself, to shine on her own. The evening ended with a quiet walk along the city streets, the lights casting long shadows on the pavement. Max was unusually quiet, and Charlotte couldn't help but wonder what was on his mind. When they reached her apartment, he turned to her with a serious expression. "Charlotte, there's something I want to ask you," he said, his voice suddenly filled with a depth of emotion she hadn't expected. "What is it?" she asked, her curiosity piqued. Max took a deep breath, as if gathering his thoughts. "I know this is all moving quickly, and I don't want to rush you. But I feel like there's something between us, something real. I've never felt this way about anyone before." Charlotte's heart skipped a beat. Was he saying what she thought he was saying? "Max," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. "I don't know what this is either, but I feel it too. I feel like I've known you forever, even though it's only been a short time." Max smiled, a soft, genuine smile that made her heart flutter. "Then let's take this one step at a time," he said, his voice tender. "I want to see where this goes, Charlotte. And I want you to feel safe with me. No pressure. Just us." Charlotte nodded, a wave of warmth washing over her. For the first time in a long while, she felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, she was excited to find out. Max had given her more than just a glimpse into a new world. He had given her the freedom to be herself, to explore her potential, and to embrace the unknown. She was no longer the girl who faded into the background. With Max, she was finally starting to believe that she could have it all: love, success, and the confidence to walk into any room and know she belonged. As they said their goodbyes that evening, Charlotte realized that her life had already started to change in ways she never could have imagined. And it had all begun with one chance encounter, one conversation with a man who had seen something in her that she hadn't seen in herself. She didn't know where this journey would take her, but she was ready for whatever came next. The next few weeks with Max felt like a whirlwind, but in the best way possible. Charlotte found herself growing more and more comfortable in her own skin. Max's presence had a calming effect on her. He was supportive but never pushy, giving her the space to be herself while also showing her a side of life she had only ever dreamed about. They spent time together almost every day, whether it was at a gala, a quiet dinner, or simply walking through the city streets. Max's world was so different from her own, yet when they were together, everything felt natural. Charlotte started to realize that it wasn't just his wealth that made Max stand out. It was his integrity, his kindness, and his ability to genuinely care for those around him. He wasn't like the others in his social circle, who often used their wealth as a weapon. Max used his influence to help others, to make a real difference in the world. One afternoon, they sat together in a cafe near the city's art district. The streets outside were bustling with life, but inside, everything was peaceful. Max was telling her about a new business venture he was working on, a project aimed at helping underprivileged communities gain access to better healthcare. Charlotte was fascinated. "That's incredible," she said, her eyes wide with admiration. "I had no idea you were involved in something like that." Max shrugged, a modest smile playing on his lips. "I try to do what I can. It's not about the money, Charlotte. It's about making a real impact." She nodded, feeling a warmth in her chest. It was moments like these that made her realize just how lucky she was to have met him. Max had shown her a side of herself she never knew existed. He had helped her see that she didn't have to hide or be ashamed of who she was. She could stand tall, just as she was. The next day, Max invited her to an event, a charity auction benefiting the healthcare project he was working on. Charlotte was nervous, knowing that she would be surrounded by people she hadn't yet gotten to know. But Max assured her that everything would be fine. "You'll be great. he said, giving her a reassuring smile. Just be yourself, and everything else will fall into place. The event was held at an upscale venue, with elegant decor and a sense of exclusivity that made Charlotte feel out of her depth. As they entered, she could feel the eyes of the guests on them. She instinctively reached for Max's hand, and he squeezed it gently, offering her a silent promise of support. The evening went smoothly. Charlotte was introduced to a number of influential people, and although she felt the familiar pang of discomfort at first, she quickly realized that she had nothing to be afraid of. Max's friends and colleagues were warm and welcoming, and as the night wore on, she found herself laughing and chatting with ease. But it was when Max stood up to speak that the evening truly took a turn. He made a heartfelt speech about the importance of giving back to the community and using one's resources to make a difference. His words resonated deeply with Charlotte. She had always wanted to do something meaningful with her life, but she had never known how to start. Max was showing her that it wasn't about having the perfect plan. It was about taking action, no matter how small. As the night came to a close, Max pulled her aside, his expression more serious than usual. "Charlotte," he said, his voice low, "I've been thinking about something." She looked up at him, her heart suddenly racing. "What's on your mind?" "I want you to be a part of this," he said, his gaze steady. "I want you to help me with the project. I know you have a unique perspective, and I believe you can make a real difference." Charlotte felt a wave of emotion wash over her. She had never been asked to contribute to something like this before. The idea that Max, someone she respected deeply, wanted her involvement meant more to her than she could put into words. "I'd be honored," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Max smiled, a look of genuine relief crossing his face. "Good. I knew you would." In that moment, Charlotte realized that her life had changed in more ways than one. She wasn't just a woman who had stumbled into the world of the rich and powerful. She was someone who had earned her place there. She was no longer just watching from the sidelines. She was an active participant in her own story. With Max by her side, she knew there were no limits to what she could accomplish. The future was uncertain, but for the first time, Charlotte felt ready to face it head-on. Charlotte had been working alongside Max on his healthcare project for a few weeks now, and with each passing day, she felt more connected to her purpose. The early feelings of being out of place had started to fade. She had found her rhythm, balancing the demands of the project with her growing relationship with Max. They had become a team in more ways than one. Max continued to support her, encouraging her at every step and always reminding her that she was capable of more than she realized. He wasn't just a mentor. He was a partner, someone who genuinely cared about her success. Their relationship, which had started out as something unexpected, was now something deeper, something she had never imagined. One evening, after another successful meeting with potential donors, Max and Charlotte sat on the terrace of his apartment overlooking the city. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow across the skyline. Charlotte leaned back in her chair, a sense of satisfaction settling over her. "I think we finally got this thing off the ground," she said, smiling. Max glanced at her, his expression soft. "You've done an incredible job, Charlotte. I couldn't have done it without you." She laughed softly, shaking her head. "I'm just doing my part. You're the one who started it all." Max's gaze turned serious, and for a moment, there was an intensity in his eyes that Charlotte hadn't seen before. "No, Charlotte," he said, his voice steady. "You've become essential to this. Not just the project, but to everything I'm doing. I'm glad you're here." The words struck her deeply. She had never imagined she would be standing next to someone like Max, let alone be an integral part of something that could change lives. His belief in her, his faith in what they were building together, gave her a confidence she never thought she'd have. Over the weeks, she had learned to navigate not only the world of high society, but also the complexities of the healthcare project. She was becoming someone who had a voice, someone who could make a real difference. The more time she spent with Max, the more she realized that she was starting to see the world through his eyes. It wasn't just about wealth or status. It was about the impact one person could make. And with Max's guidance, she was learning how to use her own voice to contribute to something greater than herself. But there was still one thing that lingered in the back of her mind: her relationship with Max. They had become so close, so comfortable with each other, but there was an unspoken tension, something neither of them had addressed. Charlotte couldn't deny that she was falling for him. but she also knew that their lives were complicated. Max had a world of responsibility on his shoulders, and Charlotte wasn't sure where she fit in that world. One night, after a long day of meetings, Charlotte found herself alone in her apartment, her mind racing. She couldn't help but think about what Max had said on the terrace. He had always been open with her, but she wasn't sure how to interpret his words. Was he saying that he wanted more? Or was he just expressing gratitude? The uncertainty weighed on her. She had never been one to rush into things, especially when emotions were involved. She valued what they had, but she didn't want to make a mistake. The next day, Max called her to discuss a new strategy for the project. Their conversation was light, but Charlotte could sense the same quiet tension that had been building for weeks. After they finished, she hesitated for a moment, then decided to be brave. "Max, can we talk?" she asked, her voice steady but nervous. "Of course," he replied, his tone immediately softening. They agreed to meet at a quiet park near her apartment later that evening. When they sat down on a bench overlooking a small pond, Charlotte took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts. "I've been thinking," she started, her voice a little shaky, "about what you said the other night. About how important I am to the project, and to you." Max turned to her, his eyes filled with understanding. "Charlotte, I mean every word I say," he said gently. "You are important to me, in every way." She looked down at her hands, trying to steady her emotions. "I don't want to complicate things," she said, the words feeling heavy in her chest. "But I don't know where this is going. I'm falling for you, Max. But I don't want it to get in the way of what we're doing, of the project. I don't want to risk it." Max's expression softened, and he reached out, taking her hand in his. "Charlotte," he said, his voice warm and reassuring, "you don't need to worry. What we're building together, this project, our future, it's something we'll do together. And I want you in every part of it. I want you in my life, Charlotte. And whatever this is, I'm not going to let it interfere with what we're working toward. But I also don't want to hide how I feel." Charlotte's heart skipped a beat. In that moment, she realized that Max wasn't just asking for her partnership in the project. He was asking for her partnership in life. The uncertainty that had been clouding her thoughts began to clear. She wasn't just a bystander anymore. She was an active participant in both their personal lives and their shared mission. For the first time, Charlotte felt like she wasn't just in the right place at the right time. She was exactly where she was meant to be. With Max by her side, she was ready for whatever came next. Charlotte sat quietly at her desk, staring at the glowing screen in front of her. The healthcare project had come a long way since she first started working with Max, and now it was almost ready to launch. She could feel the excitement building in the air, but there was also a sense of nervousness. The project had become more than just an initiative. It had become a part of who she was. Every day, she put her heart and soul into it, knowing that what they were doing would make a real difference in the world. But that wasn't the only thing that had changed. Max's presence in her life had been nothing short of transformative. The connection they shared was undeniable, and she found herself thinking about him more and more. He had shown her a side of herself she didn't even know existed. He had helped her build confidence, not only in the project, but in herself. They had become a true team, working together, supporting each other, and building something that mattered. As the weeks passed, their relationship continued to evolve. It wasn't just about business anymore. They spent more time together, away from the office, enjoying the little things. Coffee in the mornings, long walks in the park, quiet dinners at home. It was in these moments that Charlotte felt the most connected to Max. She wasn't just the girl helping him with his project. She was the woman he was learning to trust, the person he was confiding in. And in return, she trusted him with everything. Her hopes, her fears, her dreams for the future. One evening, as they sat on the balcony of Max's apartment, watching the sunset paint the sky with shades of orange and pink, Charlotte turned to him with a smile. "I can't believe how far we've come," she said, her voice filled with a mix of pride and disbelief. Max looked at her, his eyes softening as he took her hand in his. "You've been incredible, Charlotte. I couldn't have done it without you. But it's not just the project that I'm grateful for." Charlotte felt her heart skip a beat at his words. She looked up at him, unsure of what he meant. Max took a deep breath, his gaze steady as he spoke again. "I'm grateful for you, for everything you've brought into my life." Charlotte's chest tightened at his sincerity. She had never been one to put herself first, to accept compliments or praise. But the way Max spoke made her feel like she was exactly where she needed to be. For a moment, the world outside seemed to fade away, leaving just the two of them standing in the quiet space they had created together. "Max," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I don't know where this is going, but I know I want to be here with you." His smile widened, and he gently cupped her face in his hands, leaning in to kiss her forehead. "I want that too, Charlotte. More than anything." The words hung in the air between them, full of unspoken promises and shared understanding. As the evening grew darker, Max stood up and pulled her into his arms. "Let's go inside," he said softly. "We've got a lot to celebrate." Charlotte nodded, feeling a sense of peace wash over her. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew that with Max by her side, she was ready to face it. Together, they had already achieved so much, and Charlotte felt confident that whatever came next, they could handle it. The next few months passed in a blur of excitement and anticipation. The healthcare project officially launched, and the response was overwhelmingly positive. Max's vision had come to life, and Charlotte was proud to be a part of it. As they celebrated their success, Charlotte realized that she had found something even more valuable than the project itself. She had found love. Not the kind of love she had always imagined, but something deeper, something that had grown organically between them. Max had shown her what it meant to be truly seen, truly valued. He had given her the courage to step into her own light, to embrace the woman she was becoming. And in return, she had given him her heart. She wasn't the same person she had been when they first met. She had changed, not because of what Max had given her, but because of what she had discovered in herself. With Max, she had learned that she didn't need to prove anything to anyone. She just needed to believe in herself. And in that belief, she had found strength, confidence, and a love that she never thought possible. As she looked at Max that evening, surrounded by the people they had helped, the success they had achieved, Charlotte knew that this was just the beginning. Their journey was far from over, but whatever came next, they would face it together. The months passed quickly, each day more fulfilling than the last. Charlotte had found her place, not just within the healthcare project, but in Max's life. The work they did together felt meaningful, and every time they collaborated on new initiatives, Charlotte couldn't help but marvel at how far they had come. It wasn't just about changing lives anymore. It was about changing their own. She had begun to feel like she truly belonged, both in Max's world and in the larger world they were trying to impact. But even with everything going so well, there was still an undeniable tension between them, something unspoken that lingered in the quiet moments. Their relationship had grown deeper, and Charlotte had found herself falling more in love with Max every day. She could see the way he looked at her, the way his eyes softened when they spoke, the quiet moments they shared in between meetings and events. He had become her confidant, her partner in every sense of the word. And yet, there was still a part of her that couldn't help but wonder if this was all too good to be true. She had never experienced something like this before, and the fear of it slipping away haunted her. Max, on the other hand, seemed unwavering in his devotion. There were no signs of hesitation, no second thoughts. He was there for her, always, in the ways that mattered most. But Charlotte had always been cautious. She wanted to believe that what they had was real, but a part of her was still unsure. It wasn't until one night, when they were sitting together on the couch, that Charlotte finally found the courage to speak what had been on her mind for so long. The apartment was quiet, the only sound the soft hum of the city outside. Max was leaning back against the armrest, a book in his hand, but his eyes kept straying to Charlotte. She had been thinking about how far they had come, how much they had built together, and the future that seemed to be waiting for them. She could feel the weight of her own thoughts pressing down on her, and for the first time in a long while, she decided to be open. "Max," she began, her voice a little tentative, "I've been thinking a lot about us lately." Max looked up at her, his expression immediately softening. He set his book down, focusing his full attention on her. "What's on your mind?" he asked, his voice steady and reassuring. Charlotte hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to put her feelings into words. I don't know," she said, looking down at her hands. "I guess I've been afraid that this isn't real, that everything is moving so quickly, and I'm just waiting for something to go wrong." Max's gaze remained fixed on her, and she could see the understanding in his eyes. He reached out and gently took her hand in his. "Charlotte," he said softly, his voice warm and comforting. I know things have moved quickly, but I'm not going anywhere. What we have is real, and I'm not going to let it slip away. His words were like a balm to the worries that had been gnawing at her. She could feel the sincerity in his touch, in the steadiness of his voice. Max had never been the type to make empty promises, and somehow, she knew he meant every word. She met his gaze, her heart beating faster as the truth of his words sank in. I want to believe that, she whispered. Max leaned forward, cupping her face gently with his hands. You don't have to be afraid, Charlotte, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere. Charlotte felt a lump form in her throat as the weight of his words settled over her. All the doubts, all the fears, seemed to melt away in that moment. It was as if everything she had been holding on to, every insecurity, every fear of abandonment, had been lifted by his certainty, his promise. She reached up to touch his face, her fingers trembling slightly. I love you, she said softly, the words feeling both new and familiar at the same time. Max smiled, his eyes lighting up with warmth. I love you too, Charlotte. He kissed her forehead gently, holding her close. In that moment, everything felt right. They didn't need to know every step of the future. They just needed to know that they were in it together. And that was enough. The next day, Charlotte woke up with a sense of clarity she hadn't felt in a long time. Max had given her the reassurance she needed, not with grand gestures, but with his quiet confidence and unwavering support. He had shown her that love wasn't about perfection. It was about trust, and about being there for each other, no matter what. Charlotte knew now that what they had wasn't just a fleeting moment. It was the beginning of something much more, and she was ready to face whatever came next, with Max by her side. The months after their conversation felt like a new chapter, one that Charlotte had never imagined she would write. Every day, the bond between her and Max deepened. They were partners in both their personal lives and the world they had created through their project. It wasn't just about the work anymore. It was about the life they were building together. As the healthcare project expanded, Charlotte found herself taking on more leadership roles, guiding the direction of their efforts alongside Max. She had grown so much since the day they first met. She wasn't the same girl who felt like an outsider in the room anymore. She was now the woman who had found her voice, her purpose. The project had touched the lives of so many, and Charlotte could feel the weight of that responsibility on her shoulders, but it didn't overwhelm her. She had Max by her side, and with him, she felt invincible. One quiet evening, after another full day of meetings and brainstorming sessions, Charlotte and Max sat together at his apartment. They had just finished dinner, and the air between them was comfortable, full of unspoken understanding. Max was reading something on his tablet, but Charlotte couldn't help but watch him, feeling a sense of contentment wash over her. She had never imagined she could feel so at peace. Max, she said softly, breaking the silence. He looked up at her, his expression gentle. I've been thinking, Charlotte began, her voice a little hesitant. Max put his tablet down and gave her his full attention. About what? She took a deep breath, collecting her thoughts. About everything. About how far we've come. About how different my life is now compared to a year ago. Max smiled, his eyes warm as he reached across the table to take her hand in his. I feel the same way. I never could have imagined that everything would fall into place like this. But it did, and I'm so grateful for that. Charlotte nodded, squeezing his hand. She had never felt more sure of anything in her life. The project, their relationship, their future, it was all starting to make sense. You've changed my life, Max, she said, her voice thick with emotion. In ways I never thought possible. You've helped me see things differently, see myself differently. Max leaned back in his chair, studying her with a soft expression. Charlotte, you've always been capable. You just needed someone to help you see that. And I'm just happy to be the one to help you get there. She felt a warmth spread through her chest at his words. It was more than just the success of the project or the recognition they were receiving. It was the way Max had helped her grow as a person. He had never tried to change her. He had only ever encouraged her to be the best version of herself. And that was what made their relationship so special. She wasn't just his partner in business. She was his partner in life. They had built something incredible together, and it wasn't just about their work. It was about their love for each other, their shared dreams, and the trust they had in one another. That night, as they sat together, Max turned to her, his expression turning serious. Charlotte, there's something I want to ask you, he said, his voice steady. She looked at him, her heart fluttering with a mix of curiosity and anticipation. What is it? Max took a deep breath before speaking again. I've been thinking a lot about the future. And about us. And I want to know if you're ready for the next step. Are you ready to be with me? Not just in this work we're doing, but in everything? For the long haul. Charlotte's breath caught in her throat. She knew what he was asking, and for the first time, she realized that she was ready. Ready for everything. Ready to build a future with him. She had always been cautious, but Max had shown her what it meant to truly trust someone, to open up and share a life together. And now, she knew that she was ready to take that leap. With him. Yes, she said softly, the answer coming from her heart. I'm ready. Max smiled, his eyes bright with happiness. He reached out to take her hand, his grip firm and comforting. I'm so glad to hear that, Charlotte, he said, his voice filled with relief. Because I can't imagine my life without you in it. The words settled over her like a warm embrace. And in that moment, Charlotte knew that no matter what the future held, they would face it together. As they sat together that evening, surrounded by the life they had built and the love they shared, Charlotte realized that everything had led them to this point. Their journey wasn't over, it was just beginning. And as long as they had each other, there was nothing they couldn't accomplish. The future was theirs to create, together,